For a little country, New Zealand certainly punches above its weight for scenery. From the big volcano country of the North Island to the Southern Alps down south, all these landscapes have two things in common: plenty of hills and plenty of trucks. No matter what the landscape is, there'll always be a truck working somewhere under that cloud or behind those mountains, in the rain or under the cloak of darkness. We're going to take you on a trip around the country and have a look at some of the rigs that make this country tick. Of course, we can't show you every truck out there. However, we're going to see a wide variety of trucks working in tasks all over the country and take a look at a few of the more significant trucks that have been put to work in the last couple of years. As well as that, we've got an old girl that's nudging 2 million kilometres and still going strong. Any driver that regularly travels State Highway 1 through the desert plateau will know how hard it can blow up there and how quickly the weather can change. But Canterbury knows a thing or two about wind as well, as you'll see later. The only good thing about the big winds last spring is that it'll keep a lot of trucks in work. You wouldn't know it by the beautiful weather, but this is the morning after one of the biggest blows in Canterbury's recorded history. An estimated 1 million tonne of logs was dropped around Canterbury by the wind, and the damage was truly astronomical in scale. Canterbury Logging Company, Steve Murphy Limited, has built up one of the most admired logging fleets in the country, and they'll be at the forefront of the clean-up. On this morning, a lot of roads were blocked due to downed trees and power lines, and this block was one of the very few still operating in the region on the day. So a lot of the Murphy gear was diverted into this block while roads were cleared, down power lines made safe, and things were knocked back into shape. Take a close look at this block. Look for the snapped off trees and the hectares just laid flat. It's enough to break your heart, and the loggers and logging crews get no joy from this sort of work. Sure, there's employment for some time to come, but it's not the sort of work that does anybody any good. If you ask any driver which weather condition they dislike the most, we'd put money on them picking fog, and logging drivers in particular. We can't think of many things more unpleasant than peering over a bonnet into a thick fog with 30-tonne of logs behind the cab. We've got a calm morning this morning, however, and the fog will burn off eventually, and when it did, the light made Jason Lyon's Argosy fair glitter in the early morning light. Jason says he's very impressed by the truck so far and really likes the DD15. The facelift model Argosy is a handsome truck for sure, and we'll never forget when we encountered our first one. Stephen was working some tough country up in the central North Island on the morning, and that big Argosy sure cut an impressive figure in the gloom.
I was the first friend on an Argosy I've driven of this series here with a DD15 motor in it. Pretty impressed with it. It's good.
Let's head back down south again and get into the Canterbury backcountry. On mornings like this, there are few jobs better than working with logs deep in the Canterbury backcountry. There's nothing like a big landscape and the snarl of a hard-working diesel clawing its way through the backcountry. When you're behind the wheel, sometimes it's easy to forget just how good the truck can look and how good it sounds. We're going to head into those mountains way in the distance, but we're going to come into them from the far side or from the north. We're going into Eskhead Station, which is in the Lake Sumner region, and we're going to be travelling with Fletcher Farms and the new 9800i Eagle that Hilton Fletcher put to work recently. She's a roomy big beast that's got the Pro Sleeper cab on it, and Hilton put it to work for some very good reasons.
I wanted comfort, needed the room, trying to cut down like on accommodation costs, that sort of thing. We can have a share at the works, whatever, and park up. And yeah, get going again the next morning. The international thing after 26 years in Nissans, it was quite hard going away from them, but we're after more power and hoping to get better fuel economy, which has proven to be the case. And yeah, it's still supporting like New Zealand franchise with international being built in Mount Maunganui, and knowing the local service guys, workshop manager and whatnot, knowing we're going to get the backup service and that sort of thing at the end of the day. We have had Cummins motors earlier on when my father was driving. We had an old International Wacko, so I suppose in a way things have done a whole big circle and came back to us. But yeah, knowing it's a proven package, I guess, for Cummins motor, the Road Ranger gearbox and whatnot. Yeah, it's all proven gear and to do the yards really that you know, to cover the country we're covering.
Hilton has a load of hand-shorn merinos to pull out, but bad weather, the big snow and then slips on jacks has delayed the haul. Once you're over the first big climb, you follow the deeply gorged Huranui River for quite a way, but you've always got to be on your toes, as fishermen, hunters and other recreational users of the backcountry could be around any corner. Eskhead Station was established in 1859 and has stayed in the same family for over 122 years. It's your classic high country station and still has its original 1863 cob homestead still standing. That building had walls ½ a metre thick to withstand the bitter cold in these mountains, and it's still in very good repair, and was lived in up until recent times. It's an historic station, and some of the buildings, including the Cobb House, are listed with the Historic Places Trust. Fulton knew the stockyard was going to be quite damp after all that rain and snow, so he put a couple of 44-gallon drums in the back of the truck filled with water to give him a bit more weight over the drivers.
It's stepped up to the mark for every challenge we've put to it. Some of the roads we go out, like Lake Sumner Road, Mount Virginia Road, it is quite steep, gnarly sort of going, and traction-wise, I can't fault this with full lock-up diffs and cross locks and that. We haven't had any trouble on any of the shingle hills or corrugations, anything like that. It's all been pretty straightforward. Yeah, for the territory, well, the distance we're travelling, it's sort of required now. Like we're travelling further. There's no local works in Christchurch anymore, so we're either travelling. Well, our nearest works is Ashburton, so we're either going Ashburton or onto Timaru, Oamaru, up to Nelson. And in the peak time of year, we've got more than one load to do, so yeah, we can be caught out anywhere really.
And how does the big International handle the backcountry, all those rocky stream crossings and narrow little twisty roads you guys have to travel?
Yeah, very well, I feel. With the traction control, the crosslock diffs and that haven't had to be pulled yet, touch wood. But no, it handles it well. It's the suspension, airbag suspension, that sort of thing. It's comfortable at the same time as covering that hard ground.
Fletcher Farms originally started out as farmers. What's the tie-up with the transport? Is the transport for the farm, or is it an offshoot because you don't like farming? No.
We've always had trucks and that, with coinciding with the agriculture gear, the headers and that sort of thing. Back in the 80s, when Transpac went bust, my father had a couple of trucks here, and local guys started asking Dad to do a bit of wool cartage and stock cartage, that sort of thing. So then, we sort of grew slowly from there over a period of time. We ended up getting a stock truck, dedicated stock truck, and then, when I came home from working away, I came back, got on that stock truck, and sort of been on them ever since. But as time's gone on, we've grown, like dedicated ground spreaders, freight truck, that sort of thing that came over time, sort of to work more with our clients, and over time it's built up now to where we've got 7 trucks, 5 guys on full time plus myself.
The weather had been building up all morning, and by the time Hilton and Ben pulled out of the shelter of the valley, it was blowing a gale. Up on Jack's saddle, it was all we could do to stay vertical, and Hilton's gamble that he was going to beat the weather paid off. The Rakaia Bridge just south of Christchurch on State Highway 1 is our longest, and it stretches over one of the busiest bits of water in the country. It's a narrow old bridge that is long overdue for retirement, and it was built long before anybody could imagine rigs of the size they are today. But it's not the bridge we're interested in, it's the mountains in the background. Actually, the mountains beyond the mountains in the background. We're going into Arrowsmith Station, which is adjacent to the headwaters of the Rakaia catchment, way back in the spine of the Southern Alps. This is the watershed of the Ashburton River, and that's the Arrowsmith Range that Arrowsmith Station is named after. This is part of the Southern Alps mountain range, and a big nor'wester is building. Sprayer driver Paul Connell knows better than anyone how bad these nor'westers can be. He's racing in at dawn to beat the weather and get the spraying done on Arrowsmith Station before the wind gets too stiff. As it is, it's marginal, and he knows he's only got a short window of opportunity before he'll be heading back to the yard for an early smoke-out. Paul has been spraying with Philip Waring ever since Philip started the company back in 1980. The business started out by being a spraying contractor, and this 4x4 Mercedes-Benz Atego is the latest in a long line of trucks rigged out to spray. It's fitted with a 24-metre boom that is shock isolated to protect it from the rigours of travelling on rough terrain. The little Merc is nimble in this sort of going, and while not unstoppable, it's truly amazing where this thing will go in the hands of an operator as experienced as Paul is. All the time the nor'wester is building and getting stronger and stronger. Once you can't see the mountains, it's time to head home, and by now the nor'wester would blow the milk out of your tea. Hayden Lyle is also in the Arrowsmith bringing out a load of merinos in his K104 Kenworth. The last time we saw Hayden was up at Rakaia back in 2010, but he's got a new 5-axle livestock trailer these days, and he's got the hammer down as he heads out of the Arrowsmith. It's already raining and the weather's cutting up rough behind him. Warings are based in Methven, which is in the heart of grain country. This part of Canterbury fair scorches in the summer, and it's earned itself the reputation for being New Zealand's grain basket. Waring trucks are a common sight on the big grain farms in the region during the season, but they've got a number of companies within their group, and as well as owning Arrowsmith Station, are involved in harvesting, spraying, stock, general cartage and logging amongst other things. Mike Henderson was driving the truck back then, and we joined him for a trip down into Southland to pick up one of Daniel's cranes, a Manitowoc 12,000 crawler crane that had to be delivered to Dunedin. All up, this load in combination is running at 95 tonne, and is 3.5 metres wide. It's a sizable load, and the trailer needed a couple of rows added, as well as a dolly to undertake this shift. It certainly cut an impressive sight as it cruised north through Southland and into Otago. That big Cummings sure sounded good on the pull, and it had a good workout ahead of it, as there's some good stiff climbs between Balclutha and Dunedin. We caught up with Mike at Springs Junction on the Lewis Pass on another trip about the same time, when he had a load that was too large to drag up the Kaingaroa coast to get to Picton. The tunnels and tight corners, not to mention the traffic volumes, make it impossible for loads as large as these to be dragged up the Kaingaroa coast. This is a route that Daniel Smith Industries truck drivers are very familiar with, as they regularly drag their big gear between the islands. It's a nice trip up the Waiao, the traffic's light, and it makes a nice change from going up and down the coast. While we were waiting for Mike to arrive at Springs Junction, this Southerly T650 pulled out. It's a fine looking hauler, and Southerlys are no stranger to heading over the coast, as they haul a lot of gear to the mines. "2013 will be remembered for a lot of things, not all of them good, but the introduction of Kenworth's T659 was something to celebrate. The 8-wheeler variant of the T650 was something that some truckers, logging operators in particular, had been waiting for. Without a doubt, it was one of the more significant new models to enter the market during the year. Not only was it a new model, but this one had Cummins' new ISX E5 engine in it. That's a Cummins with SCR. We caught up with one of the first ones into work, and it had Southerly painted on the door too. But this was a different company, being Southerly Logging, but they had the same way of thinking by the look of things, and Bevan had based the purchase of this new truck pretty much on how the old 650 went, as one of the factors. Like the T650, the 659 is sure to become one of the great trucks of its era. It's built like a battleship and is as no nonsense as it can get.
Well, it was new to Howard Brothers, and they on-sold it to McKinney's Transport, and then from McKinney's Transport it went to Pettigrew's Freightways, and then went to Edwards Brothers Contracting. They traded it on their Pacific. From there it was bought by Riverland Contractors. Then it came up to Gisborne for J.D. Wallace, and then to Hitchens. Bill Hitchens had it, to Barry Caulfield, and then to me. So she's had a few owners in their day.
It aims for about 10 or 11,000 log feet. Sometimes you get up to 12, 13, but around 11,000 log feet, yeah.
And what would that be in weight?
That'd give an all-up weight of around 60 tonnes, all up, yeah.
And what was powering the truck?
It had 250 Cummins. Now, when we got it, a bloke, Graham Jepson Engineering in Napier, he was one that actually put us on. I think he dealt a bit through Delop and King. And excuse me, he would have liked to have had a GM motor, but at the time there was restrictions. They called it had to have a certain British Empire content, and because GM was American, Cummins is American, but Cummins did have a factory in Scotland, so the 250 Cummins that come out was actually from Scotland. Otherwise we would have had a GM motor in it. Hence the reason the Cummins motor.
And how did the Cummins perform? Because 250 horsepower isn't a lot for 60 tonne.
No, because in those days that was a big motor. It did a great job. I moved up here to Mungatanaba in 1958, and I logged into the mill up here in the GMC until 1959, July 1959. They built Tawa Timber Company built a new mill in town, and they closed up the Mungatanaba mill. So that's when we started carting to the rail. from the bush to the rail at Kotamari. We originally carted direct until we started the offloading log dump. Well, as I said, the Canadian, this Pat Wilson, they designed the truck, and because we do get snow over the top at Maungatanava, so hence it came out with no front wheel brakes. But that was an advantage. But quite often, we had a TID double axle jinker, but it was hydraulic brakes, and we seemed to have a lot of trouble with the brakes on the air over hydraulic. It's a pity if the trailer jinker was full air, and more often than not I wouldn't have any trailer brakes, and it sort of was a bit awkward at times.
Yeah. Well, a guy that worked for, did work with fantastic to see all these trucks that have arrived here today, and Steptoe, and it was quite amazing putting this beside two of the off-highway trucks up in the bush. And I mean, when I first hopped on this, I thought this was a massive truck. You know, I thought, goodness me, what a big unit. When you see it up beside the trucks of today, especially the off-highway trucks, I mean, suddenly it doesn't look quite so big. But when you've seen photos of what this used to cart, I mean, it was certainly an impressive vehicle in its day. I can first remember you used to have a Leyland Hippo carting out, and this was relatively new then. The Leyland was coming up the Hook Hill at a snail's pace, and then Steptoe came around the corner with 10-foot bolsters, and it looked like it was going at 100 miles an hour, just to give you a comparison of a 250 against the old Leyland, British Leyland, you know, and it was just a really impressive sight. Never to think that at some point in the future I would actually be driving it, you know. So, as I say, it's been a privilege to have driven it and meet the people that I have met over the years.
Road, and she rides quite well. I always put something on the back because she still has got no front brakes. She came out like that, and yeah, it's a bit of a challenge stopping, so I usually put something on the back just to weigh her down a little bit and make it ride a little bit better. But other than that, she gets along pretty good. Yeah, she's quite good to drive. Yeah. So she's been repowered before I got it with a 252 Super Cummins motor. They put a Road Ranger in it earlier in its life in Napier, and it had the imported Timken Brave Vincent supplied diffs when I got it, which were very low. It was 70 k's full bore, and I put later high-speed diffs in it so we could buzz along the road at the current speed. Plus, it's still got its auxiliary box in it, so it's a 10-speed Road Ranger with 4-speed auxiliary. So I've got 40 gears, and at the current speed limit, I'm got 2 gears to go. I drive it in direct, and every now and again I get a challenge, so it does slip into overdrive. But yeah, that's about it. It's a very valued member of the family, and truck's got a lot of history.
As well as the Eagle we saw earlier, Hilton Fletcher has this 1990 T650 Kenworth in harness that was originally put to work by Jackson's in the North Island. We made a return visit to Eskhead Station just to see this old battler in action and see how she stacks up against more modern trucks.
Years ago, we had our owner driver on as a with a bulk unit, lift outside bulk unit, and he went on to do his own things, so we needed to replace that truck. Found the Kenworth advertised up in Taupo, and a mechanic friend of ours and myself went up and we had a look and drove her home. We weren't 100% sure if going to a committed bathtub was the right thing to do, but it has proven, the right option for us, especially the airstrip work and that sort of thing we're doing. It's proved quite ideal as it's turned out.
It's got nearly a couple of million Ks on it. A bit of a gamble to put it into work in the sort of country you guys work, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and that's played well, taken into consideration at the time. Second-hand gear, it can be dodgy, but touch wood, it hasn't let us down at all. No, it has proved bloody reliable truck, and for its age and the size, it's doing an ideal job for us. Yeah.
It's a mean haul into Eskhead Station, especially when there's been a wet winter and the track's not looking that flash. But station manager Sam Radford had been fixing the track whenever he had a spare moment, and when he gave Hilton the call, it still wasn't that flash in places, but he needed to get the fertiliser down, and he knew the truck would probably need to tow up that last steep drag to the airstrip, so he tagged along in the John Deere. Sure enough, the track was washed out and loose in places, But the old Kenworth gave it a good go and surprised everybody how far it managed to get up that last steep climb before it finally spun to a standstill. I see you had a bit of a stop up the hill there. What was going on there?
Yeah, it was just a bit of loose metal and some wheel tracks, and yeah, it was pretty steep for a unit that's sort of designed to be on the tar seal.
And how do you like the 444? She go up the hill all right, does she?
Yeah, no, she pulls well for an old truck.
Mark, how come you're on the bulk truck? You're normally on stock, I believe.
Yeah, I'm generally full-time stock driver, but at the moment we're down a driver for this, so just quite common at the moment. There's a bit of a shortage throughout the country on drivers, and yeah, so we're down a guy, so I'm quite happy to do a few days in the Kenworth as we need it.
Do you like this sort of backcountry work? Do you enjoy getting into these places that not many people get a chance to see?
No, and that's sort of why I'm here doing what I'm doing, because I've spent a lot of years farming and shepherding also, and just a couple of valleys across up the Virginia Road. I was shepherding up there before I came back driving, so I've spent quite a bit of time mustering in this sort of country, and do enjoy getting out and driving in it rather than driving up and down the State Highway 1 or around town. It's not really what interests me.
It takes quite a skill set to drive this sort of country. Not country for a novice, is it?
Not really. Yeah, it's quite different to driving up and down the tar seal, and it does help to get a base from a couple of years of driving spreaders in the hill country. Certainly help with driving up and down these tricky narrow gravel roads, and you do have to have a bit of throttle control, otherwise you start spinning, you just keep spinning, and it's hard to get that drive back.
Well, this engine not being electronic will probably be quite responsive to the throttle, is it? No lag?
No, and yeah, having plenty of torque like it does, it certainly gets up and goes, and you do still have to watch it. Like with all that torque, it's very easy to break traction, although it does help with having full cross locks and diff locks if you need it.
Arguably, the most significant truck to go to work in New Zealand during 2013 would have to be the Mercedes-Benz SLT Actros. The mega space-cabbed SLT is rated to push or pull 250 tonne, and it's a special build created by the Mercedes-Benz custom tailored trucks team in Molsheim, Germany. We've joined Fulton's heavy haul team as they cart an 86-tonne boiler from Port Timaru. They needed to head inland and go over the Lindis as State Highway 1 down the east coast posed too many problems and difficulties for a load of this size. It's a much longer trip and has a couple of very big climbs in it, but it is far and away the best way to get this load into Southland. Before they head inland, there's still the Waitaki River to cross, and that means closing down the bridge as Steve eases the big Merc across it. Back in the day, Kurau was one of the busiest towns in the country. That was during the days of the big dam projects on the Waitaki River and the Mackenzie Basin, as everything that went up to there was channeled through here. However, these days it's back to being a one-horse town, and is mainly famous now for having two of the most rickety bridges in existence. They were built 132 years ago and span the two braids of the Waitaki. One is 140 metres long and the other 256. There's plenty of big traffic that goes over here, and you should see her shake when a B train goes over it. New bridges will replace these in 2014, which is well timed as these are definitely living on borrowed time. You can't shift big loads without good pilots, and on this trip we've got Charlie Boys, Pete Harrison and Richard Johnson. We asked Fulton Hogan heavy haulage manager Mark McNeely why they chose the big Mercedes over the other heavy haul contenders in the market.
With its ability to take off on the hills, it doesn't matter what load you have on it, it still pulls away. There's no stress, there's no pain, there's no shuddering. It's effortlessly for the truck, and it gives also the ability to match up with other trucks in a push-pull environment. It takes up the slack. And you don't know it's doing it. It hides the fact that there's two units in the push-pull. It's doing the work easier than our other heavier haul units. The 130-tonne units, 120-tonne units that we run. It certainly does it with ease, and its fuel economy is very good too. With it still has that ability to, with a manual gearbox, to lock up and to give that fuel efficiency.
So you've got the best of both worlds. You've got the soft takeoff of a automatic like an Allison with the long legs of a manual transmission.
That's exactly right. In a perfect world you'd have both, and here we have it here.
Even though the big Mercedes has prodigious tractability, they've added Glenn Jacobs and the company T904 Kenworth to act as a pusher should there be too much ice, snow or grit on the Lindis. It's better to play safe given there's bad weather on the way, and all up the combination of two tractors and the load comes to an impressive 163 tonne on the move. The two tractors had a combined 1200 horsepower available to drag this load up the pass, and they made easy meat of it. Nobody was quite sure how the automated transmission in the big German and the manual Road Ranger and the Kenworth would get on, but it was no dramas at the end of the day. The automated box made it easy to match speeds, the drivers reported later on. The sun was setting as they crested the Lindis, but they still had a fair way to go to get to Cromwell for the night on the 2-day haul. Because of weight restrictions on the Alexander Bridge, the convoy went over the Clyde Dam and round through the back of Earnscleugh before heading south. The weather packed in soon after they left Alexandra, and we had commitments up north. However, we caught up with Stephen and Mark not so long ago to get their thoughts on how their big tractor was performing. They were dragging a log hauler into the back of Waimate Forest, and unfortunately the weather was a bit wet, but it gave us the chance to catch up and get some thoughts on the truck.
I'm just about to take off. Put my foot on the go pedal. Now the clutch is winding up with oil, and slowly we'll just take off. I've been in situations where you wouldn't think about pulling away with a manual clutch. It just, cause carnage. It would blow something.
When you went over the Lindis Pass, Stephen, how did she go up over? Did you really need that pusher up behind you?
Yeah, it made the job a lot easier. Once we put it on, it was quite impressive. The two of us hooked on. We had 1200 horsepower. We took off up the hill, and next minute I looked down, we're doing 40 k's going up the Lindis from Marama up to the summit, and yeah, it was very impressive. Going down the other side, I had my retarder just on, and the Kenworth with its jake brakes, we actually didn't have to touch the brakes many times. We had enough braking power on the engines to pull us up. And then when we got down to the bottom, we unhooked the Kenworth, and I went by my own steam again down. We had to cross the Clyde Dam. Across the Clyde Dam and down through Earnscleugh on back to the main road at Alexandra Bridge, where we turned, and heading up the hill out of Alex, which is 11%, and she drove up there by herself. No trouble until just got to the top, and she changed into first gear, but yeah, it was good as gold. And then we carried on to Butcher's Dam, and we hooked onto the Kenworth again. Hooked onto the Kenworth again and drove through from Butcher's Dam to Roxburgh Hydro Dam, and just it made the job just so much easier and just a wee bit quicker.
So it's a lot of the work you do, this type of stuff, going into ugly little forestry tracks and hauling heavy loads up big grades. Is that why you guys got this truck?
Yes. we seem to be picking up more and more forestry gear, and forestry gear is getting bigger, heavier, and no, it's doing the job, and the forestry is pretty good. I didn't think it was going to be that good, but no, she is working well.
You're flying down for it?
You've got a quite steep camber here, Mark, and now I'm going to be stuck here.
It's an MTE 5 rows of 8. It's made to be a 10 row. The front 3 units are the main body, and the 2 rear, how we've got it configured at the moment, are a clip-on. But at any one point and stage we can add axles, and that's the platform component we can add in to increase up to 10 axle line. So no, and it's proving itself again in what we're using it for currently, a 5 axle, not too long to be up in the bush, just long enough though that it's great manoeuvrability, and still we can carry what we need to, especially those haulers again and the likes, up in the bush without getting cast, and to have that steering ability and that 600mm of suspension travel it's a great thing to have.
Christchurch builder Duncan Taylor specialises in building high-end houses, and when a client wanted something special built on a remote farm up in Conroy Flats on the Kaikoura coast, the only real way of pulling it off was to transport prefabs to the site. He got Smith Crane and Construction to do the job, and they utilised the capabilities of their heavy haul Isuzu Gigamax to good advantage for this unusual job. AJ Pearson drives the big 530 horsepower Gigamax, which is fitted with a hydraulically actuated sliding turntable that'll come in useful later in this shift and save Smiths needing to bring in a winch truck. The country in this region is difficult, full of gullies, short sharp climbs and narrow twisty tracks. Here's a good example of how handy a hydraulic turntable is. What you do is lock the truck brakes, slide the turntable back which pushes the trailer, then lock its brakes, release the truck brakes, slide the turntable forward which in turn pulls the truck back to the trailer, and repeat as many times as necessary. We've sped it up for you, but you can see how this often saves having to winch into position, and it's a handy tool to have in the toolbox when you need it. All in all, this was a nicely executed shift into a difficult and remote location. Duncan Taylor was very impressed by how well the Smith team, together with their trucks and crane, undertook this job. It saved him having more men out of town and weeks of work, and that's money in the bank when you're a builder. One of the most impressive trucks you'll probably never get to see went to work in the Kaingaroa forests back in 2011, and being an off-highway logging double, it'll never leave the forest. Papanui 5 was put to work by Vern Higgins, and it continues his tradition of putting big Mac gear to work in the bush. Vern was the very first off-highway logging contractor to go to work in Kaingaroa 37 years ago, and was the youngest driver when Fletcher's took over way back then. This is the 5th Mac named Papanui that Vern has put to work in the last 28 years, and everything about this truck is hard out. There's a 600 horse Cummins signature under that snout, and it's got a Mack triple countershaft heavy duty 18 speed transmission and 160 tonne rated Meritor axles. Vern's son Michael drives this off-highway double, and they usually try to keep the payload to about 90 tonne, even though this combination is capable of hauling considerably more. Vern has seen plenty of people come and go in the off-highway haulage game, and knows you have to take care of the gear. He and his 2 sons do all their own welding and maintenance, and Vern's operation is a masterclass in how to do things properly and make the gear last the distance in what has to be the most brutal job of them all, off-highway logging doubles in the Kaingaroa forests. We'll continue the Mac theme way down in Southland, which is a Mac-rich environment, if ever there was one. Heavy Haulage is one of the Richardson group of companies in Southland and specialise in moving a wide variety of equipment around the region. They've headed to a gold mine just south of Gore to pick up some mining gear that has to be dragged south. The Richardson group has a well-known and long association with the Mack brand, so it's no surprise to see that they use Mack for their heavy haulage needs. This pair of Macks make a sweet combination. The new Trident has the MP8 engine, but the Cummins 600 and the older Superliner sure sound sweet, both on the pull and on the Jake brake. When a 600 square metre building needed to be moved across a suburban environment in the Hutt Valley in 2011, the job went to a company that has a huge reputation in the industry for performing large or difficult building relocations, Alpha Specialised Movers. The building in question was the former golf clubhouse at Bolcott, which needed to be moved across the valley to Nainai, where it was to become a community centre. Moving a normal sized building is usually tricky enough, but the Alpha team had to contend with bridges and a stream they needed to traverse before the building could be put back onto the ground, and it was a logistical nightmare with permissions needed from numerous authorities. Chris Ellis and Murray Russell operate Alpha, and they put 4 tractors on the job, their 550 cat-powered Western Star and an RB Mack, and they called on a couple of Sterlings from Central House Movers and Bulls. We'll let the video speak for itself on what was a highly complex shift, one that Alpha made look easy. But these boys have decades of experience under their belts, and this is a job that probably only a handful of companies would ever even consider taking on. The local Nainai community was hugely appreciative of Alpha's efforts, and the look of amazement on people's faces as Alpha contorted and twisted these big loads through the streets was just priceless.